This is HR Hidden Ranger Streaming with another reaction video, and this one is delivered with a heavy sort of fanboy heart because as of like about a half hour ago or less than that, I heard that and it's all over Twitter that the legendary Stan Lee Stanley Martin Lieber has died at the age of 95. And yeah, he's left a remarkable legacy. Like, this man turned the comics industry around, not single handedly, but with the help of his fellow creators, his artists, Jack Kirby in particular, and also Steve Ditko, and John Buscema, Gene Colan, John Romita Sr., and a number of others, Don Heck. Um, yeah, they helped turn they helped breathe new life into the comics industry in the '60s at a time when Marvel Comics was actually being published by national periodicals, by DC Comics. So DC was not only their competitor, but also in charge of how many titles they could publish. They limited them to, I believe it was 8 titles per month, and hoping that that would severely handicap Marvel's output. So what they did was they staggered the release dates of their titles so that they could have like up to 16 titles a month, because then it's bi-monthly, rather than 8 monthly issues. They can have like 16 bi-monthly issues and stuff like that. And in the very early 60s, the story goes, or at least the story he's told, is that he was ready to quit the comics industry because he felt creatively stifled by the amount of like complexity and large words and whatnot that he could put in his comic stories. He hated having to dumb them down for a young audience, so he was ready to quit. He was gonna go, he had seen comics as his as something he would do on his way to becoming a great American novelist, you know, and you know, so he never actually expected to be in comics as long as he had. So he by the '60s he was like in his 40s, so he was about ready to quit, and he had a conversation with his wife, the late Joan S. Lee, um, about quitting, and she told him, okay, well, if the problem is that you're not being allowed to write the comics you want, you know what? Just write the comics you want. Just write them the way you want them to be written, because at the worst thing that's going to happen is that they'll fire you. You're already planning to leave, so why not just go for it? What do you have to lose? Basically paraphrased. And he took her advice, and that led to the co-creation of the Fantastic Four, which was surprisingly successful, and it led to him doing more and more comics. It led to him uh, co-creating the Hulk and Thor with Jack Kirby, and creating SpiderMan, the that one of the greatest comic book characters of all time, and with Steve Ditko, and also Doctor Strange with Steve Ditko, um, Iron Man with Don Heck and Jack Kirby. Um, the list goes on and on, and yeah, that was amazing. It was amazing to think, how much, that conversation changed. Like if that had gone in, if that had gone in, that conversation between him and his wife had gone in any way differently, that would have that would have utterly changed the landscape of comics. I don't know if there would have been a comics industry past the '60s if if that hadn't happened or it happened differently. But yeah, so he's left behind a remarkable legacy. I mean, there's a lot of like creator rights sort of issues and disputes between him and his co-creators. Particularly Kirby and Ditko. That have a lot's been made of those. Um, but yeah, so there's all that, and like he was also executive producer in so many, not only Marvel movies, but before that Marvel Productions and Marvel Studios and different media production companies that did a lot. Like particularly Marvel Productions in the late '70s, early '80s. Like surprising amount of '80s cartoons were put out by Marvel Productions. Not just Spider-Man, His Amazing Friends, the Incredible Hulk. Those of that kind, but also what a lot of people may not realize is G.I. Joe was Marvel Productions, Transformers, the Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Let's see, Defenders of the Earth. That was a smaller known one. Let's see, RoboCop, Dino Riders. And there was even there was even I think there was something about Marvel Productions even having the rights to Toei's Super Sentai for a while before they were produced by Saban and became Power Rangers. Yeah, there was something about that. I'm not entirely sure how accurate that is, but that's kind of interesting. But the one of the big wigs at Marvel Productions, Margaret Loesch, or however you pronounce it, it's Loesh. She went on to be a studio bigwig at Fox Kids, and she got Batman the Animated Series, X-Men the Animated Series, and she was instrumental in Fox Kids and in Power Rangers, and yeah, she got her start at Marvel Productions. Just the influence of Marvel has just been has had far further reaching consequences than maybe a lot of people realize. But and now it's this $1 billion+ movie juggernaut, and marketing everywhere. And yeah, it's kind of amazing to see what Stan Lee had accomplished. But I figured I'd make this a not only a discussion of Stan Lee, like his life and stuff like that, but also I'd make this a reaction video to every Stan Lee cameo he's ever made, which is a lot. Haven't actually seen this one before, so I don't know if they're including his animated voiceover cameos, because he's made some of those, whether in narration or just showing up as random characters, usually named Stan. But yeah, Stan Lee's had no problem being the visible face of Marvel, and basically the Mark Twain of comics. So here we go. Every Stan Lee cameo ever.
It is such fun creating characters, writing stories, even doing interviews, even though I can't hear most of what the guy says to me. And when you do something that you know the fans seem to enjoy, that gives you such satisfaction, you don't want to stop.
Answer the question! David must answer the question!
Oh, there he is.
Excuse me, I'm looking for some guy named Stan Lee.
They are doing animated.
SpiderMan? Pam, hold my calls for a while. I think I've finally gone crazy. You know, Spidey, I've always wanted to experience real web-slinging.
And I've always wanted to be appreciated as a real hero. It seems you've made me into one. Thanks.
Hey.
Oh, Mallrats.
You, looking at that couple inside?
Actually, I was just looking at this little pink number over here.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of nice. They look happy, don't they? You know, it reminds me of an issue of Spider-Man I did when Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy went lingerie shopping. Of course, the Green Goblin showed up, and he pumpkin bombed the hell out of the place. But aside from that, it's pretty much the same thing.
Oh my God. Holy shit! Aren't you?
Oh, Stanley. Hi.
Hot dog vendor.
Over 200 nations attending. The Secret Service has transformed Ellis Island.
Save children. And then he gets saved by a young man Murdoch.
Hey, Murdoch!
Hulk from 2003.
Good morning, Dr. Krantz.
Right next to right next to Lou Ferrigno. There's him saving another bystander.
Welcome back to the Baxter, Dr. Richards. I've got the usual for you. Good to have you back, sir.
Cameoing as Willie Lumpkin, their mailman. There's Chris Claremont. And there's Stanley, of course. But yeah, Chris Claremont, longtime X-Men writer. Spider-Man received key to the city.
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
Invitation, sir.
I should be on that list.
Name?
Stanley.
Yeah, nice try, buddy.
No,
Nice
no,
try.
really, I'm
Nice try.
Stanley.
That actually happened in the comics.
Sure don't. Look great, Hef.
One of my favorite cameos he's ever done.
Milwaukee. A man drank one of those Guarana sodas. Guess it had a little more kick than he was looking for.
Wow.
Where was it bottled?
Porto Verde.
Stan Smash!
Hey, the Oracle of Oracle. What a pleasure. Nice to see you.
Larry King.
Larry!
Him, it's Larry King.
Did it work?
One of those, if you'll, right,
Did it work?
I think that man in the brown jacket toward the center, like the taller one, I think that's J. Michael Straczynski. He wrote a lot of cartoon series in the 80s, and he created Babylon 5, and he wrote, a long-running run on Amazing Spider-Man in the early 2000s. So yeah, that's J. Michael Straczynski. Oh, and also he wrote a run on Thor that was a personal inspiration for the 2011 Thor movie, which is why he has a cameo here.
Captain, that's your cue.
I thought he'd be taller.
This is one of my favorite cameos he's ever done. That was just classic.
Superheroes in New York? Give me a break.
This is probably nothing.
Are your pulses pounding? Can you feel its eyes upon you? The dweller in the dark is watching.
Relax, Harry. It's just Stan.
The janitor.
And all the other worlds would just pass us by. It's beautiful. It's simple. Any questions?
Can I have my shoe back?
All Mom ever wanted was your love. To be with you at our two-story Victorian home in the Cotswolds. But could you even give her a moment? What with your banking job requiring you to travel to the States from Tuesday to Saturday every other week? No!
I'm terribly sorry about your loss, dear. As for you, now is your chance to do better. Why don't you see that you take it?
Thank you, sir.
Let's go.
That was funny. I especially like this is Gemma Simmons' first undercover role as a SHIELD agent in that episode, and this is basically the part where she reveals herself to be the kind of D&D player who just shows up at the table with at least 3 to 5 pages of single spaced, typed up backstory for her character that nobody else cares about. And I love the look on Coulson's face where he's just kind of impressed by all the needless detail she's going into. He's like, I don't think you really need to do this. I don't think you really need to go into that level of detail.
Wear that?
No. If you're gonna fight a war, you gotta wear a uniform.
Oh, man. I am so fired.
Aww.
It's not cool to get help. Walk by yourself, you little gargoyle. Look at Mr. Smiles over here.
You like art?
Where's your wife, old man? What a Class A prevert.
Prevert.
Fred. Son. Dad. I wear 'em front. I wear 'em back. I go inside out. Then I go front and back.
Dad! Alexis Ortiz.
That old man gets around.
I think I know that guy.
No, see this was aged for 1,000 years. The barrels built from the wreck of Grunho's fleet is not meant for mortal men.
Neither was Omaha Beach, Blondie. Stop trying to scare us. Come on.
All right.
Eggshell shield.
Hey, could I borrow the sports section? Thank you.
Howard Stark with a shiner.
Fine, right? The bartenders are all like, yeah, crazy stupid fine.
To our stage right now. Give it up for Chastity.
You okay?
you Tony Stank?
Yes, this is Tony Stank.
Love it. And there's Joan, his late wife.
That is hilarious. Okay. Wow, nice suit.
Zip it, Stanley!
Oh, man. Anyway, before I was so rudely interrupted, at that time, I was a Federal Expressman. Hey, fellas.
The Watchers.
Hey, wait, where are you going? Hey, you were supposed to be my lift home. How will I get out of here? Hey, gee, I've got so many more stories to tell. Guys, oh, gee. They're the greatest stories ever told. Heroes show us we don't need to be perfect to do what's right.
I haven't actually seen this.
It's not about living without fear, but facing injustice. It's not about being powerful, but finding your calling when you least expect it. They show us it's okay to be vulnerable, no matter how tough you are. Because even though they're heroes, they're still human.
Every day with these damn alarms. Shut it off.
Don't make me come down there, you punk.
Hey, Gary! How you doing?
Marjorie, how are you? How's your mother?
I think whatever you do, you should do what you most want to do and what you're best at. Too many people don't really do what their heart's desire is, but they try to do something else because they think, well, it'll be easier to get a job or to make money. And if that happens, then when you're doing it, you feel like you're working. But if you do what you really want to do, you feel like you're playing. It's easier for you to do.
So, yeah. That was every Stan Lee cameo ever, or, you know, to maybe not his every appearance in media. Like they skipped his narration of like the 80s Marvel cartoons and his host segments on, you know, Marvel Action Hour, Iron Man and Fantastic Four from the 1984, 1983, something like that. I mean 94, 93, that kind of thing. Let's see. There was also like his numerous voiceovers in video games, such as like he was this running gag in the Lego Marvel games, in that he's basically like this. He's like this bystander that you have to like solve puzzles in order to save from some perilous predicament, you know. And let's see, you know, he cameoed in as a voice in well, not just his voice, but also his appearance in Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, where he was Senator Lieber, and he was, you know, in one of my previous playthrough videos of Spider-Man 4 for PlayStation 4, he cameoed in one scene, and you know, with a visual likeness. He was in I think, yeah, he was in both Amazing Spider-Man movie tie-in video games, where he was the where, like, you know, had his, it not only had his visual likeness, but in um, the first Amazing Spider-Man video game, there was like you could actually play as Stan Lee. Basically, the idea was that Stan was a friend of the Parker family, and he was letting he was letting Peter Parker stay in his penthouse for the summer or something like that, and in Midtown Manhattan. So Stan Lee ended up getting this kind of this DLC mini game sort of thing where like a bunch of his like script pages like flew out the window, and then he had to basically resort to Spider-Man style web slinging in order to get those pages back. It's kind of awesome, you know. But yeah, these are all of his. Yeah, these are his cameos. So yeah, let's see. Oh, before I forget, a personal anecdote on myself actually meeting Stan Lee. It was in 1997 in Mesquite, Texas, and I was like 17 or 18 at the time. Like he was a guest of honor, of course, at this relatively small comic book convention, to the point where his Q&A panel was in the what you call it, was in the dealer room slash kind of cafeteria sort of thing of this convention, because it was not a large one by any stretch of the imagination, but they managed to get Stan Lee, so good on them. And I attended the Q&A panel. I asked a question about Heroes Reborn, which was just starting in the at that time, and I also in preparation for the event, I had drawn this I believe it was a 4-page comic of Peter Parker's origin story for Spider-Man. Basically, the first 3 pages were Peter Parker stumbling out of the science experiment where he's bitten by that spider, right into traffic. His spider sense goes off. He ends up leaping onto a building, sticking to it, climbing up the building, realizing what he can do, and then there's this huge, all this New York City, spread out in front of him, just being blown away by the whole thing. And then the last page was him in costume as Spider-Man, making his first television appearance on a talk show, and I even drew like comic book writer Kurt Busiek as the TV show host, kind of in a Letterman, Conan O'Brien sort of capacity, and notably, one thing I did in the background of one of the pages was on one of the buildings. I gave it the logo of Lieber, which was Stan's real name. His original full name was Stanley Martin Lieber before he got it legally changed to Stan Lee, because that's how he wrote all of his checks anyway. And so, I pointed that out to him. I pointed out the last name Lieber, and he gave me this warm smile and this pat on the shoulder, and and it was a great feeling. I felt like $1,000,000, that was such a great experience, and I've been to comic book conventions after that, Stan Lee has been to, but I've usually ended up having other things going on to where I'm like, I've already met Stan Lee. I can meet some other people instead. Now I'm kind of wondering if I should have just taken the opportunity to go and see Stan Lee, just to be like, you probably don't remember me at all, but because Stan Lee has a famously Swiss cheese sort of memory, and which I can kind of relate to, but because my memory is Swiss cheese as well. But yeah, like I always thought that he was like a neat guy. I mean, there was a whole lot of like right stuff and creator ownership stuff that was rather messy, but he always seemed like he had a good heart. And for better or worse, he changed the comics industry in ways that are just kind of amazing to untangle. So, with all that said, this has been HR Hidden Ranger Streaming with another reaction video, this one of every Stan Lee cameo ever, and a tribute to Stan the Man Lee. If you like what I'm doing, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at HR Streaming, and I'll be back with more reaction videos. And I'm currently playing through Batman Arkham Knight, and I'm basically waiting for the next PS4 Spider-Man DLC to drop. That's how I'm living these days. So, take care of yourself, guys. Excelsior! Bye.